السلام عليكم. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ به من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم وقال الله تعالى بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد فإن خير الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها. A few months ago, I started a series of talks based upon a 4-point agenda for anybody who is a da'i, caller to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or who is a leader in a leadership capacity, CEO, teacher, speaker, anybody. And those 4 tasks, just for the sake of revision and reminding ourselves, are the task of being an effective listener. And that was the topic of my first khutbah in the series, which was a few months ago. The second one, which we'll be discussing today, is the task of being an effective speaker. The third one is the task of reflection, thinking, deliberation. And the fourth one is the task of making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the way I want to start with the task of speaking is by just reminding us that the quality, and I've talked about that before, the quality that distinguishes human beings from other animals is the ability of communication. And I talked about that in detail, quoting from the book Sapiens by Yuha Hariri, as well as from the Quran, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Rahman mentions after Khalaq al-Insan, Allamahul Bayan, that he taught human being the ability of bayan, which you can interpret as the ability to express ourselves and the ability to communicate with each other in an effective way. So the skills of being a good speaker include the ability to communicate thoughts and ideas to the audience according to their intellectual level and in a manner that will appeal to the listeners. There's a very famous saying, majority of people think it's from Ali radiallahu ta'ala. No, it comes to us in different variation, khatabun nasa ala qadri uqulihim, or kallamun nasa ala qadri uqulihim, to talk to the people according to their intellectual level. And there is a saying from Abdullah bin Masud radiallahu ta'ala, that if you talk to the people in a way that they don't really understand it, you will end up creating fitna. Because people misunderstand you, that can create a big problem. And that usually happens in this world. So that has to be kept at the back of our mind when we are speaking, when we are engaging in any dialogue, any discussion with anybody, even at the dining table with our own children, our own family. I want to start with a verse that we recite every week in Friday Khutbah, and I recited it as well. Ya allazina amanu ittaqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida. There are people who have believed, be conscious of Allah and speak qawlan sadida. The word qal, from which qala, yaqulu, yaquluna, taqulu, qul, quli are derived, very, very common verb in Arabic language, is referring to the inherent ability of the human beings to speak. We speak in the form of words. We don't speak in the form of just loud shouts and shrieks, which may be effective in communicating among individuals, but we use the medium of language, which is the call coming out of our words, but reflecting the thoughts of our mind and of our heart. And I want you to keep this triangle or triad in view whenever you are reading or listening to somebody, that there are three components to that. The first is the speaker or the writer. Second is the word, the spoken word or the written word. And the third is you, the reader or the listener. So if you look at the Quran, the words of the Quran are divine from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nobody doubts that there is anything in the Quran which is human. It's all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is both the speaker and the writer. He didn't write it in his own hands, but the Quran is the written text. The second is the words from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And third is we, who read the Quran, who listen to the Quran, who try to understand it. And it's the understanding of the written text, the divine text, and it also applies to the hadith and fiqh, where the disagreement occurs, because we understand things differently. A word may have multiple meanings. Which meaning is more applicable to that particular text and that particular context? That can create issues in understanding. So Quran talks a lot about call, and there are different adjectives which are used in the Quran for the call. One of them here is call and sabi, that occurs twice in the Quran. And Dr. Asrar Ahmad used to say that if any concept is mentioned more than once in the Quran, then pay attention to it. But different adjectives which occur in the Quran related to the call are qalan azima, qalan baliga, qalan ma'rufa, qalan maysura. Now, I don't have the time to go through each and every adjective and say, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choose that particular adjective in that particular context? So when next time when you read the Quran and the word qalan comes, don't just focus on call. See, what's the adjective? And why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choose this description of the call in that particular context? You will learn much more. So let's now talk to qalan sabida. The important thing we'll talk about that is the next verses talk about the importance of the call, the speech. And that's why I said the art of speaking or being an effective speaker can be learned through the Quran and through the Hadith. And before speaking, the most important thing is when not to speak. And if you look at the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, always memorize this Hadith, that whoever believes in Allah and the last day should either speak what is good or remain quiet. There are three parts of this hadith. I'm just talking about one thing. And it's the ability of not speaking that's extremely important. I will give you a personal example. Many times I've mentioned many examples from my own background, that in the late 90s, 80s, I went to England for an examination called MRCP. Some of the doctors here may know. The advice that I got from my seniors was that if the examiner asks you a question, even if you know the answer, don't say anything. They said, hold yourself for a few seconds. Give the impression that you are thinking before you are answering. And that really helped me. Because the examiners, the British examiners, are very particular in mannerism and what words you choose and how you speak. They want to make sure that the candidate has the ability to think, not of just blurting out answers. In Pakistani culture, it was different. If you keep giving answer, the examiners are very impressed. You have memorized a lot. The British in that particular examination were not checking your knowledge, they were checking your approach, how you think. So that thinking is an extremely important component of the ability to speak. And perhaps the wisdom lies in not speaking when you don't know enough. Okay, so now, how is the word qalan sabida explained? And there are different mufassirin who have given different explanations of that. One of the very useful commentaries of the Quran which has come out in the market in the last 10 years is the Yesterday Quran, edited by Sayyid Hussain Nasr. One of the editors actually happens to be in my own community. He's from Turkey originally, Dr. Dagli. He's teaching at the College of the Holy Cross, and sometimes he comes to ICB in the Khutbas as well. He's the main editor of that. So I don't know who exactly, because this is a committee of 5 people, so I don't know who exactly wrote these words. But commenting upon that, they say, Qawlan Sadida can be speak justly, one meaning. And it says it enjoins testifying truthfully, speaking in a manner that is upright and free from any corruption, and speaking so that the outward locution corresponds to the inward meaning. Okay? And he quotes another verse from the Quran, and when you speak, be just, even if it be against a kinsman. If you have the time this afternoon, go on Google or any browser that you want and search for the most dishonest professions. I gave a khutbah about it about 15 years ago, so I read it at that time. Then I reread it a couple of weeks ago. Has there been any change in those most dishonest professions? And if I remember correctly, the 10 most dishonest professions are as follows, and they all have to do with how they speak to you. Number 1 will be lobbyists, congressmen, senators, insurance agents, car salesmen, stockbrokers. I don't remember the entire list of 10, but this is what is given. Go on. This is an updated list in the last couple of years, and it's very much similar to what it was before. Our problem, the problem in the Muslim Ummah is we don't have a strong lobby. Perhaps because we don't want to lie. We are bound by our religion to speak Qawlan Sadida, upright speech. And look at what happens to Rashidatullah, speaking upright. Unfortunately, those are the professions that are very successful. I'm not saying that we should adopt their way of speaking, but we need our own spokesmen, young women and men, preferably born in the United States, who know the culture, who have much better accent than the bearded guy like me has, who know the right manner of speaking. We need to train them to be effective speakers, and I will come back to that, how the Prophet ﷺ trained people, and to send them to be our representatives. We'll come back to that, inshallah. So the important part that I was going to, and I kind of got lost, the importance of Qawlan Sadida comes next. يُصْلِحْ لَكُمْ أَعْمَالَكُمْ, that you speak in an upright manner while remaining conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then He will rectify your actions. The words and the actions go hand in hand. Next, وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُمْ, and He will forgive your mistakes. وَمَنْ يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فَقَدْ فَازَ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا, and whoever obeys Allah and His Prophet ﷺ has indeed become very successful. Commenting upon that, Yusuf Ali mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connects the speech with actions and the divine forgiveness of human shortcomings and sins. We must not only speak the truth as far as we know it, but we may always try to hit the right point. Actually, Muhammad Asad says Sadid means hitting the right point, right target. When you shoot an arrow at a target, okay, you have paid $1, now you want to hit so that you can get some prize or something. You want it to be straight to the bull's eye. So the word is that it hits the bull's eye, it achieves its target, its intended target, and not a deceptive target. And that is the key. What's your target when you are speaking, and connected with the 10 most dishonest professions. Continuing, we must not speak unreasonably, and when we do speak, we must not beat about the bush, but go straight to that which is right, in deed as well as in word. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make our conduct right and cure any defects that there may be in our knowledge and character. Our words can reflect our knowledge and our character. Our body language is extremely important. With our endeavor directed straight to the goal, Sadida, we shall be forgiven our errors, shortcomings, faults, and sins of the past. Now, the importance of the ability to communicate is also illustrated in the Quran when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave this humongous responsibility to Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. Izhab ila fir'auna innahu tagha. Go to Fir'aun, he has transgressed. Now try to imagine Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. He has been a shepherd with his father-in-law for about 8 to 10 years. He ran away from Egypt. He had never thought about prophethood. He was never used to revelation or anything. He's traveling at night with his family, trying to find his way, metaphorically as well, when this extraordinary event took place. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduced himself and gave him a responsibility. Okay, he has run away from Pharaoh. Now Allah is saying, go to him. He has transgressed. What does he ask from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So first thing is, Qala Rabbi shrah li sadri. Oh Allah, open up my heart, open up my chest. Now this inshrah sadr has led to some ahadith in our Islamic literature when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Alam nashrah laka sadrak. Did we not open up your chest, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Musa alayhi salatu wasallam is also asking, oh Allah, open up my chest. It's obviously a metaphor, but we have some ahadith about the actual opening of the chest of the Prophet. And maybe it took place. Allah knows best. But here it is, according to Yusuf Ali, he said that the breast is reputed to be the seat of knowledge and affections. Affection means emotions. The gift of the highest is spiritual insight is what he prays for first. So Inshrah Sadr. Another way you can say that when you send somebody to be your representative, the task is obviously difficult, and the person whom you are going to address or your messenger is going to address is not going to be very lenient. And I will give one example. So the messenger has to have a strong heart to be able to withstand any pressure that might be upon him. There may be danger to his life as well. Messengers have been killed as well. He may hear something that will make his blood boil, but he has to control himself. So that's another way. Second, he says, وَيَسِّرْ amri, and make the task easy for me. The next part is connected with what I'm saying. وَحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِّن لِسَانِي. And again, this has led to some stories. Release the knot in my tongue. It was not a physical knot in his tongue. He did not stammer. He was a strong man. He knew how to speak. But here, he's now not speaking for himself. He is Allah's messenger. He will be communicating the message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is where the problem occurs, that when we have our representatives representing our masajid, our schools, our community, do we have the people who really know the art of speaking? Do we have any programs of training our children in the art of public speaking? And if not, we should do that. Pharmaceuticals company do that. About 25 years ago, I actually attended a seminar in which a pharmaceutical company, they were advertising their product, but they have to find a loophole. And the loophole was, it's a doctor's training session. So one session was training us how to speak, basically how to sell their products. But they do that. A lot of corporations do that. They spend money, time, and effort in their employees to be effective speakers for them. And similarly, the budding politicians are also trained in how to speak, how not to speak. So that's an important thing. And then he says, يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي. Now in Arabic language, so that they understand me. He could have used the word يَعْلَمُ قَوْلِي or يَفْهَمُ قَوْلِي. But he used the word يَفْقَهُ قَوْلِي. Because ilm, fahm, and fiqh, they may all mean understanding if you translate into English so that they understand me. But they all have different meanings. Ya'lamu is to know just something. Yafhamu is to understand the meaning of the word or the intended mafhum of the statement. But yafqahu is a very deeper understanding. That's why fiqh is a much deeper understanding. Not every scholar is a faqih. Not every qazi is a faqih. Fiqh is a much higher level. That you can understand, you can grasp the deeper meaning of the statement. Anybody can read English language and anybody can read the Constitution of the United States, but anybody cannot become a judge of the Supreme Court. You have to be at that level where you have demonstrated the ability to understand, to grasp the meaning of a legal statement. So what he's trying to say is that not just that they understand the outward meaning of what I'm going to tell, they should understand the reality. And that will come if I have the ability to speak in this way. So he's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him the ability to be a good speaker. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولذكر الله أكبر. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي والذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. So Yusuf Ali actually translates it as the gift of eloquence, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make him a better speaker. Before we go further, there will be a dua tomorrow at the Islamic Society of Greater Lowell in Chelmsford from 1 to 3 p.m. for a brother who has passed away, Brother Muhammad Azam. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Allahumma ighfir lahu warhamhu wa adkhilhu fi jannatil firdaus. He was the brother of Muhammad Khusro. He used to come here quite often. He is a long-time ICB member. Husband of Sister Shahnaz Alam, and both husband and wife used to provide delicious meals for different events and Ramadan iftars in this masjid. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward him greatly. So how did Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam choose and train the people to be his representatives in speaking? Okay, we have to learn from that. And this is a point that not many people know, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to train people how to speak. We read in these books of the Sirat that the Prophet sent him to that king or him to that king and that Sahabi to that king. But what was happening behind that, we don't usually read it, but Hafiz Ibn Hajar, in his commentary on Bukhari, Sahih Bukhari actually mentions it. So in the last few minutes that we have remaining, I will mention. But let's start with what was the goal of the Prophet ﷺ, what was his philosophy. It comes from a hadith. The Prophet ﷺ was asked a question, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, bima yurafil mu'min. O the Prophet ﷺ, what are the characteristics or what are the distinguishing characteristics of a true believer? Okay. And these three all pertain to public speakers, representatives. First he said, waqarihi, his dignity. We should live with dignity. We should conduct ourselves with dignity. When we speak with dignity and grace, our language should reflect our upbringing, our education, our religion. Waqar, as your majority of you understand this Urdu word, insan ko waqar ke saath rehna chahiye. How to conduct ourselves. Second, walina kalamihi, and the leniency of his speech. So when you speak, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and Harun alayhi salatu wasalam to Pharaoh after a lot of things have happened, he said, speak to them in a lenient way. Layyana, the word, qalan layyana, another descriptive term. And the third is wasidqa hadithihi, and the truthfulness of his speech. And these are the three principles he utilized himself to train his representatives whom he was sending to different kings. So, and one of the examples is Diha Kalbi, radiallahu ta'ala, that the Prophet ﷺ, in the 7th year after migration, he sent an envoy to the Byzantine Empire, Hercules. But there were two superpowers at that time, and I mentioned it before, the Persian Empire. The Prophet ﷺ also sent his representative over there. And the second one was the Roman Christian Byzantine Empire, and Hercules was the king of the world at the time. And he invited, Daya Kalbi invited the emperor to the Islam. He had a letter of invitation from the Prophet ﷺ. But it is mentioned that Daya Kalbi, why was he chosen by the Prophet ﷺ? There is a saying in English, horses for the courses. You choose your horse for the course. Similarly, when you are playing cricket, you choose your bowlers according to the pitch that you are playing on. So Daya Kalbi had the experience. He had already traveled to foreign countries several times before. He knew how to act in other countries very well. He was conscious of the importance of the duty given to him, and he knew that he had to be very careful. And Hafiz Ibn Hajar mentions this thing, and that will be the end of this khutbah. I don't have much more time, although there is a lot to say. It says, اختيار النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم للسفراء the choosing of the Prophet, and the Prophet selected people to be his representatives, to be his envoys, قائماً على مواصفات ربهم عليها. It was dependent, it was based upon certain qualities on which he trained them himself. That part is not usually highlighted. The Prophet ﷺ did not just teach Quran, he trained his people in the art of diplomacy. He first chose the people, he trained them on those qualities, and when he found that yes, now they are ready, then he would send them. And again, this part of the Sunnah is not usually highlighted. That's why I want to emphasize it many times. فَكَانُوا يَتَحَلَّمُونَ بِالْإِلْمِ وَالْفَصَاحَةِ. They would be decorated with knowledge and eloquence. Knowledge comes first. You have to know who you are going to. وَالصَّبْرِ وَالشُّجَاعَةِ. And patience and courage. Very important that you have to be patient. Somebody may say something that will make your blood boil. Somebody may try to frighten you. Sabr and shuja. Next, wal hikmah, wisdom. Wa husn at-tasarruf, the beauty of exchange or communication, how you deal with the people. Wa husn al-madhar, that's an important thing. Dignified people, beautiful people, smart, good-looking people, so that they can impress. So these are the qualities that the Prophet ﷺ chose in the people, and he trained them in the art of speaking. So he says, فَاخْتَارَ النَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ دَهِيَ الْكَلْبِيَ. Again, this is a Sahabi's name. Why did the Prophet ﷺ chose him? وَأَرْسَلَهُ إِلَى هِرْقَلْ أَذِيمُ الرَّوْمِ, to Hirqal, the emperor. So he said, كَانَ يُدْرَبُ بِهِ الْمَثَلْ فِي حُسْنِ السُّورَةِ. Daya Kalbi was so handsome that people will give examples. He's as handsome as Daya Kalbi. That was one thing. And he says, وَكَانَ دَيَا مَا حُسْنِ مَسْهِرِهِ فَارِسًا مَاهِرًا وَعَلِمًا بِالْرُومِ. That in addition to being a handsome young man, he was also a horse rider, very expert, a skilled one. If you need to run, you can run, save your life. And he knew the Roman culture. He was familiar with their history, with their geography, with their culture. So I want you to reflect on all of these things. The Prophet ﷺ's wisdom pertained to the art of diplomacy. It extended to that as well. And in developing people, when he left the world, ﷺ, he did not leave them in thin air. He had already trained Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu ta'ala to be the leaders. He had already trained people to be the messengers. And one of them was Rabi'a bin Amr, who went to Iran, and he was met by Rustam, the commander-in-chief. And he said, come and sit with us. And Rabi'a sat down on the floor. He said, why do you sit on the floor? Why not with me on my carpet? He said, we don't sit on your zenith. It doesn't impress me. And he said, what made you come here? And he said, we came here to take people from being the worshippers of human beings to the worship of being Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he said, do you think you will really achieve it? He said, I did not come to be defeated. And so what if you die? I don't think that you will win. He said, if we die, we'll go to Jannah. If we will win, we'll be a Ghazi. Just try. This exchange is taking place between a person who's sitting on the floor and the other person who is the leader of the second strongest army in the world at that time. He didn't seem overawed. He answered everything in a very pithy and concise manner. So those are the people that the Prophet ﷺ trained, and this is the art of speaking, public speaking, that we need to focus on to send our young women and men to Congress and Senate and be our lobbyist. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون وأقيموا الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة وقد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
La ilaha illallah. Make your lines straight. अल्लाहु अकबर। अल्हम्दुलिल्लाहि रब्बिल आलमीन अर्रहमानिर रहीम